Hello and welcome to the Matthias iOS Development Show with me, Matthias, your iOS developer. And today we're gonna use the Combine framework to make an URL call and get some data and display it in our app. Now, Combine is a really good framework. I highly recommend checking it out and looking into it. And it introduces publishers to Swift, which is really neat. And it offers some interesting ways of dealing with getting URL calls and getting that data and doing this. And instead of boring you with all of that theory, what it actually means and how it applies, we're just going to make the simplest call possible. We're just going to get us some data, display it without any error handling, without any futzing around, so we can just get the basis done and get you working on a combined call. Let's do that now. So once again, we're going to use the API of Swift of Ice and Fire for this. Which I love, which we've used in my previous videos, especially making simple URL calls natively or looking into the MVVM system. And what we have here, we have our URL, an API of Ice and Fire called API houses, which gives us in its simple form, yeah, there we go, 10 houses, like noble houses of the Game of Thrones universe. So we have here like House Baelish, House Ashwood, and we're gonna copy these things into our model here, which I've prepared for us, which is the house basic, which has to be codable, it has to be identifiable and hashable, so we can show it in our list. Right now we're only getting the name, and the idea is a UUID. That one is preset, so we can actually use it as an identifier in our list. We're only getting the name here. So all of this other stuff we are ignoring for now. If you want to make your own implementation, of course, please get some more data, play around, see what you can do. But right now we only want to get the name here. And the way this is going to work is I've already prepared our rough view around it. Is that we have our all houses display. This is the view that basically shows us how the houses look. And we have the houses parameter here that gets inserted from the outside. And with a body that shows if the houses array is empty, then it just says text loading. And otherwise we have a list here where we do a for each on our houses and show the name of that house in a text. And we can actually look at the previews here. Where we have some preview calls, preview cases. Is it running? I'm going to assume it is. So here we have, for example, our all houses display with, we add 4 houses in here with just the name House Stark, Targaryen, Lannister, and Arryn. We have another case where we add no house whatsoever, so we can test our loading view, which is here. And we have one more, which is just a spacer, because my face is here in the corner and we need to be able to move this up and down. Cool. And this one is instantiated within a grander view, which is the all houses view, which contains the view model, which is an observed object. And we basically, the body of this is the all houses display, which you've just seen, where houses is set to the variable within the view model. Now this one so far has nothing in it. We just have here our state, which is a published and private set, which contains the variable houses, which is an array of type house basic, and so far we're doing nothing else. And when we actually run this, then we will get the text loading appearing here on the screen in our app. There we go, because the array so far is empty and we haven't actually loaded anything in yet. Let's do that now. Let's get some loading done using Combine. It's already prepared a file called API. And this one imports the Combine framework. That's important, that's what we want to do. And of course we gotta have our func, so I'm gonna make a static func get houses here, where we're gonna call the URL I've just shown you. And this one needs to return not the houses, but a publisher. In this case we do an any publisher. There we go. Oh, that's the wrong button. Of type house basic. Have an error also in here. And publishers, those are the core of the Combine framework ultimately. And I'm going to abbreviate this very, very quickly. If you want to look at the theory, there's lots of material out there. lots of videos from my colleague, also the official Apple documentation. And what it basically means is it's a stream of data that can come out of a source. We can look at a publisher and basically follow that stream of data that comes out of it. In this case, we're gonna just have a single return of data coming out of it. That is fine. We can also use publishers for this. And but building on this is a very powerful framework where you can make very complicated things from it. And this is what we return. We don't return the data itself, we return the publisher that will publish this data. Now, let's continue. So we're gonna need our URL, which is a URL with a string. And we're gonna copy this one in here. And then we need to create a request still. It's a URL request with our URL we've just created. Come on. And then we set it to be a GET request. Cool, so far so good. Now this doesn't compile because we gotta finish it, but yeah, there we go. All right, and this URL has to be unwrapped. Pause unwrapping it here. Don't do this. Put it in an unwrapping thing. And now we're gonna return our publisher. And how do we create this one? We're gonna say return URL session shared. And then we're gonna go into the next line. And we're gonna say it's a data task publisher for our request. And then we're gonna do a try map. So what this basically means is we're getting the data from our request we've just created. And now we're going to try to map it to something. I'll write this wrong. I'll just finish this and then we'll take a look at this. We're gonna write here return try JSON decoder because we got a JSON package and want to decode it. Decode. And what we get is an array of type house basic. So this is what we're gonna do. Dot house basic self from our first element of data. And then we gotta receive this on the dispatch queue main, and then we erase it to any publisher. Cool. Wonderful. And our warnings of course go away. So what's happening here? We create our URL. This is this one here. We create our request as usual, set our HTTP method to be GET, and then we create a data task publisher for this request that gets us the data. And when we get the data, we're gonna do a try map where we basically try to map the data we've just gotten in a certain way. So what we want to do here is we got our JSON decoder as usual, and we're going to decode an array of type house basic from, this is our first element which we're getting here, the data on it. And we got to say, okay, we'll receive it on dispatch queue main. Here you can do later more complicated things, and we erase it to any publisher. So this means, now we get the any publisher out of it. Now that we got this function, we actually also got to call it. So let's go back to our view model. Right now, as we said, this doesn't do anything. This just has the published state of the search result view state, and all this contains is an empty array of house basic. Now let's actually do the call we just did. Let's make an init function, and we're gonna say API get houses, the function we just wrote. And what we do now, usually what we would do in the past is we would have a completion in here where we would say, okay, once the houses are gotten, we get them back from our completion, now assign them to the local variables. What we do instead is we're gonna say .sync, since this is now a publisher. And now we gotta put in two functions here. And you already see those have some interesting signatures here, where this one has to be of type subscribers completion error, and this one has to be of type house basic. So let's just create those quickly before I'm just going to let these placeholders be in here. Private func on receive completion, let's call it. And this is a subscribers completion. Oh no, we'll do it right there. Error. And we have another func which is private func on receive value. These can actually be called the same, but I prefer naming them differently so we have less confusion in here. Houses, awesome, basic. So, and we're gonna pass those in here. On receive completion is gonna be this one. On receive value is gonna be, no, don't do that please. It's gonna be this one here. And in here, we're actually gonna say what we're gonna handle with the values when we get them. But first, we also gotta store our subscriptions. And for this, we need a new variable. It's gonna be a private var subscriptions. And this is a set of an cancelable. And then after we do our sync function, we also gotta do a store in subscriptions. So it needs a colon. Cool. So this also compiles. Now what is happening here? When we receive the completion, this function here is going to get called. And if we receive the value, this function here is going to get called. And you can already see if we receive the value, it basically means, hey, we get some houses here. So we can actually say state houses, that's where we keep our houses, equals, no, I said equals, equals the houses we've just gotten. Receive completion, what we get out of here is we get basically this completion here, which can have multiple factors. So what I'm gonna do is we're gonna look at our completion variable, and this can be different types. So let's just make a switch out of this. Switch completion, and this can be case finished, or case failure. What we do here, for example, is we can deal with error handling. We're not going to do this in this example here, but ultimately, if we want to show an error, for example, and we get a failure back, then we can say, oh, set error to be true. Error to be true. And we can deal with this. But we're making the simplest possible version of this, right? So we're just going to do some printout here. Failure, and here we're going to say success. So to sum it up, on receive value, we're getting a bunch of stuff only if it's successful. On receive completion, we get the status of our data getting, of our attempt to get some data. So we can say, okay, was it successful or was it a failure? And these two have to be in here if we do a sync. Although I think we can set them to nil. Haven't checked it out yet. Don't recommend it though for now, unless you're an expert and you know what you're doing. Just make sure these are in here so you can deal with those. So yeah, let's try it out and see what happens if we call this. Oh, neat. Look at this. We had half a second of loading. And now we have our first 10 houses called and displayed in our list. Also, we can see our printout here. It says success. And congratulations, you've just implemented your first combine call. Now, let's just go through this here one more time and make sure it's all the same, right? It's all clear what we've done. So we create our all houses view model, right? This one. We have our private subscriptions here, which is a set of any cancelable. We call the API getHouses function. Let's go in there. We create a URL, we create a request, we update the request method, and we create a data task publisher from our shared URL session. We map the result to be a house basic array, receive it on a main dispatch queue, we erase it to any publisher. We go back to our view model, and then we sync what we've just gotten into these two functions, and we store it in our subscription. And in the end, it ends up in here, and we say, hey, the 10 houses we've just gotten are now in this variable, which we are subscribing to, which we are looking at here in our actual display. So they look up like this. Yeah, looks good, doesn't it? Now this is the simple view. There's no error handling in here. Although you've already seen, okay, there we can start doing maybe some error handling. This is not a pagination call. This is just a single call. But in the next video, if you want to do pagination calls, this is gonna be the great base. This is gonna be a great basis for it. And of course, this is a very simple implementation, as I keep mentioning. So we can do much more things in here. We can do a handle data call in here, for example. Handle events call. Handle events call, where we basically print out the data before we get it, before we do anything with it. We can do more checks in here, which I do recommend. And yeah, publishers are really neat. They are sort of complex by from its base level, but they are really powerful. They can do really amazing things, and I really recommend you check them out. Cool, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe this video if you would. That would be really lovely. Also, I'm Matthias_code on Twitter. It would be lovely if you could follow me, and I will see you next time.